What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Last Raps Baseball YouTube channel, and we are bringing you another episode of From the Archives. In the last episode, we were able to show 5 Hall of Famers from a set called 1980s Superstars, and of course we went through Willie Stargell and Jim Rice, Jim Palmer, Johnny Bench, and Mike Schmidt. So if you want to catch up on some of those guys, you're welcome to go back to the first episode. One thing I wanted to point out from this one was the batting gloves that Jim Rice was wearing. And before we get into this one, it was kind of interesting. It looks like the bottom hand, his left hand, was a golf glove. Of course, the top hand was a little different. And some of the players back in that era sometimes only wore one glove on the bottom hand. So I don't know, maybe Jim was just coming off the golf course and grabbed something, but he looked like he was playing a round of golf in the morning and had to take this picture in the afternoon. But anyways, I just kind of found that a bit humorous. So today we're going to go through some of the stars of the game from 1980, and when we come back, we'll kick it off with the legend known as Mr. October. Welcome back, everybody, and today we're going to kick it off with Mr. October, Reggie Jackson. And to be honest with you, there's not enough time to talk about Reggie. We could go on for hours, but my first memories of Reggie were from Game 6 of the 1977 World Series, when he clubbed 3 home runs in consecutive at-bats at Yankee Stadium. And I knew as a young boy that he was a great player, but to be honest, I never really appreciated how good he was until his career was over. And it was Reggie's birthday, a couple of weeks ago on May the 18th, and he turned 74 years old. And as it happened, he was reciting a story about when he was playing in A-ball for the Lewis Clark Broncos in Lewiston, Idaho, the short season single A Northwest League. And he was telling the story that about when he was hit in the head with a pitch in the first inning of a game. And this is where it kind of gets a little bit blurry. So it was on the MLB Network. I heard the interview. I'm not sure. I can't remember who they were with it, but it was on SXM Radio. And so, according to Wikipedia, and some of the resources through Wikipedia, that Jackson, after he was hit with a pitch, he stayed in the game and basically had 2 sac flies, driving a couple of runs, and then he later left in the 9th inning. According to the Wikipedia articles and then the references, that Jackson spent the night in St. Joseph's Hospital in Lewiston for observation. Well, in the interview, Reggie with the MLB Network said that he was denied entry to the hospital because he was black. And by the sound of it, he said the next morning he was sent off to Modesto, California, which was the other Oakland A affiliate, where he was able to receive medical attention before returning to action. And so, obviously getting hit in the head, and that was one of his memories of rookie ball, and of course, or A-ball at the time, and it wasn't really a long one. But obviously Reggie with a great career, started in Oakland, ended up going to Baltimore for a year, and then of course he signed with the Yankees, and then ended up with the Angels, and finished the last year of his career back with Oakland again. But his best quote that I remember, and I think about it often, is he says, "I was reminded that when we lose and I strike out, 1 billion people in China don't care." Now, I don't know if he was reminded by Jim Bouton, or if it was attributed by Jim Bouton, but that's kind of a quote that sticks with me, and we talk about it to kids all the time, that you might feel upset, your parents might feel upset that you strike out, but unfortunately, there's a lot of people who really don't care. And once Reggie got over that, he was able to continue on as a player. So and have a great success. So that's Reggie Jackson. He's the first one that we're going to we talked about today. One of the greats of the game, and of course a Hall of Famer. Fantastic career, Reggie Jackson. second player that we're going to talk about today, also a New York Yankee, and this would be Ron Guidry, also known as the Louisiana Lightning or Gator, and a bit of a diminutive lefty. But today I want to tell a story about coulda, woulda, shoulda, and what I mean by that is in 1976 at the trade deadline, the Baltimore Orioles and the Yankees had a trade worked out, and Guidry was supposed to be dealt to the Orioles as part of a deal. But the Yankees felt they were already giving up too much left-handed pitching in the deal to Baltimore, and they didn't want to give up on Guidry. So Guidry was rumored to go in 76 to the Orioles. Well, a year later, in 77, he was supposed to have been dealt to the Toronto Blue Jays for pitcher Bill Singer. And the Yankees okayed the deal. But it was then Toronto president at the time, Peter Ravesi, nixed the deal. And, you can only imagine what it would have been like to have and how the franchise with the Blue Jays being only in their going into their second year, what that would have meant to have Louisiana Lightning Ron Guidry on the mound. And, of course, 1978, Ron Guidry had one of the greatest seasons in Major League history. He went 25-3 with a league best 1.74 ERA, had 9 shutouts, and blew away 248 hitters, which is impressive by any standards when you think not too many guys are doing that in today's game. He won the Cy Young Award, and was only second to Jim Rice in MVP balloting. And a 14-year career. He was a 4-time All-Star, 2-time World Series champ, and unfortunately for Guidry, he battled elbow issues and called it a career in 1988, and but cemented himself as an all-time Yankee great. Not a Hall of Famer, but certainly for a one season, 1978, Ron Guidry had a season to remember for Yankee fans and for baseball fans in general. One of the greatest seasons that any pitcher has produced in the last 50 years. There you have it, Ron Guidry, Louisiana Lightning, or known as the Gator. The third player in our feature this week is former New York Met Lee Mazzilli, and I'd like to call this segment of the session, "What am I doing here?" What am I doing here with all these great players that you've just produced? Topps and Major League Baseball were always well known for doing a good job of marketing star players. So how did Lee Mazzilli find his way into this set? Well, first of all, Mazzilli was a 14-year big leaguer. He only had a .259 career average, hit 16 homers and 79 RBIs in his best seasons. Was a first-round pick out of Brooklyn, New York High School. And, he was considered to be a phenomenal athlete. His father was a welterweight boxer. He was naturally ambidextrous. They said he could throw and a switch hitter, but he could throw in both hands and adequately well. Probably the biggest mark on Lee Mazzilli's career at any point was when he was with the Pittsburgh Pirates, and he was among several of his teammates called to a Pittsburgh grand jury to testify about cocaine distribution. Later on, he managed the Orioles for a couple seasons in the early 2000s, and he did have a son who got into the minor leagues. I think he was drafted by the Mets, but ended up in the White Sox organization for some reason. He got to Double or Triple A, but didn't have any power, didn't have any juice in the bat. So that's the story on Lee Mazzilli. Why am I with the rest of these guys that were here? Well, that's kind of why. Anyways, Lee Mazzilli, and that's our player number 3. Our fourth player that we're going to talk about today is former great Don Baylor. And Don Baylor With the way some guys are getting into the Hall of Fame these days, I think Don Baylor should be in consideration. Although I have to say I don't know if he's got the numbers that some of the other guys that are now being considered to get in. With players like Ted Simmons, Lee Smith, Harold Baines, Jack Morris, Alan Trammell, in recent years being elected by the Veterans Committee. Maybe I should be the president of the Don Baylor campaign for Hall of Fame nominations. So why would I think that Baylor could be a guy considered for the Hall of Fame? Well, he had a 19-year big league career, and in 1979 he was named American League MVP. 3 times in his career he hit 30 or more homers in a season. And but what was interesting about Baylor is he was a magnet for being hit by pitches. He was well known for crowding the plate, and in his career he was hit 267 times and led the league 8 times in that category. And that's pretty impressive. But something else about Don Baylor that many people overlook and maybe don't know, in 1976, the only year that he was with the Oakland A's, and it was interesting because he was a part of the trade from Baltimore. He was sent from Baltimore to Oakland as part of the Reggie Jackson trade when Reggie was sent from Oakland to Baltimore for that one season. And Don Baylor, he stole 52 bases that season in Oakland when he was 26 or 27 years old. Now, what's the drawback? Why would we not consider Don for the Hall of Fame? Well, 260 career hitter. Generally, I'd like to think 300 over a 19-year career could punch your ticket. He only had 338 career home runs, and once upon a time 400 home runs gave you a serious consideration to get in. If you had 400, that was kind of a magic line. And then his total career hits, he was only, I think off the top of my head, he was only around 2,100 or 2,200 career hits. So if he was up around 3,000, then we're probably having a whole other discussion. Later in his career, he became the manager of the Colorado Rockies, and he won Manager of the Year in 1995. And he also later went on to manage the Cubs. But that's Don Baylor, and I think that he's probably the guy that if just had a little bit more, we'd be looking at a bust in Cooperstown for Don Baylor. Our last player in this sequence today from the archives we're going to talk about is former Boston Red Sox Fred Lynn. Fred Lynn was the first player ever to win Rookie of the Year and League MVP in the same season, and that was in 1976. And that feat's only been repeated one time, and that was 25 years later, when Ichiro Suzuki of the Seattle Mariners did the same thing. But I think Fred Lynn's is more impressive than Ichiro's, and the reason for that is that Fred Lynn did that as about a 20-year-old, 19, 20, 21-year-old player, 21-year-old player. And whereas Ichiro had already had a number of seasons under his belt playing in Japan and had come over as almost as a grizzled veteran to Major League Baseball, and of course playing against men. Whereas this was Fred Lynn coming out of college and then playing in the minors and being able to do some of that stuff. So 17-year career, a 9-time All-Star, 4-time Gold Glove winner. Won the American League batting title in 1979. So the question comes up is, why is Fred Lynn not in the Hall of Fame? Well, after the age of 26, he got hurt every single season after that. And only once in his last 11 seasons did he get 500 or more at-bats. So, the talk was, had Fred Lynn played his entire career at Fenway, he probably writes his own ticket. He probably hits over 300 bats, smacks over 400 home runs. And we're talking about his bust in Cooperstown. And, he was made, obviously, to play at Fenway Park. But, unfortunately, things change and, guys get hurt and they move on. And that's what ends up happening. But probably the greatest moment that I remember of Fred Lynn was in 1983 in the All-Star game, and I believe it was at Comiskey Park. He had a grand slam off of Atlee Hammaker, and that probably would have been, a footnote of all the greatness that Fred Lynn had. And now it's just a good answer to a trivia question, because he was the first player to hit a grand slam in an all-star game. And if I'm not mistaken, Jim Rice earlier in that inning also homered off a Hammaker, who gave up like 6 or 7 runs in that inning, which in today's by today's standard, you probably wouldn't see a pitcher in an all-star game get lit up like that, like he was. But that's Fred Lynn. He was a superstar center fielder. Great career, and unfortunately, it a long career, but didn't end up getting himself into the Hall. And I think injuries for his case had a lot to do with that. Fred Lynn. Time to talk a little bit about the background today. For whatever reason, I chose to go with the Baltimore Oriole feel, and got a book from Jim Palmer on the left side, 9 Innings to Success, and it's a recent book. It's been out for about 3 or 4 years, and yeah, it's an interesting read. I think you'd get a kick out of it. And then, of course, baseball's Iron Man, Cal Ripken Jr. Tribute to Cal Ripken on the other side. But in the middle, talk a little bit about the autographed baseball. It is of the original Boog Powell, former Baltimore Oriole. And most of the autographs are either guys that I've worked with or been around. This is one of the very few balls that I've actually purchased. This one here is a PSA DNA, has the marking on the back. And of course, you can get some of these from TriStar. TriStar has autograph shows in Houston and San Jose and different spots. And anyways, I just thought for random sake I would buy a autographed baseball package, and so they sent me the Boog Powell. And you don't know what you're getting when you get it. You got a chance to get, who knows, some famous, some guy from the early 1900s. There's usually a chase contest that goes with it. But anyways, I ended up getting Boog Powell. Not a bad signature, and not a bad ball to get it on. So that's our display for today. We got the Iron Man, we got Jim Palmer, and we got Boog Powell. Thanks again, everybody, for watching another Last Raps baseball video. If you're new here, be sure to hit the subscribe button. And if you like the video, be sure to give us a thumbs up. Have a great day, everybody, and we look forward to seeing you again tomorrow.